Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's Ask the Pet Food Pro. These chats are brought to you by Pet Food Forum and the editors of Petfood Industry, the magazine and digital content provider offering pet food expertise to the market for Ask the Pet Food Pro offers a great opportunity to connect with the industry experts and ask the questions that are top of mind while learning information to help you and your company provide high quality pet food and pet treats. Today's chat is all about hemp and CBD and their legal status or lack thereof. Our expert today is Emily Lyons, attorney with Husch Blackwell. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, Debbie. It's nice to be here.
Great. Before we start our discussion with Emily, I have a few housekeeping notes, please. First, you've all been muted to ensure everyone can hear and focus on the discussion. So please submit your questions or comments in the chat box. Some of you did submit questions beforehand, and we really appreciate those, and we'll try to get to as many as we can today during the time allowed. And finally, this chat is being recorded. You can access the recording starting in about a week at petfoodforumevents.com. and then click on the Ask the Pro tab at the top. Okay, so let's dive into this. Emily, to start, can you please explain the differences between hemp and CBD in terms of exactly what they are?
Absolutely. And that's always where I think the discussion needs to start. First of all, industrial hemp is a type of cannabis sativa, and that's kind of the overall plant species that's divided into two main categories that are regulated differently. Hemp is any cannabis plant that has less than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis. And that is not considered a drug. It's considered, just hemp. However, anything over that amount is considered marijuana and subject to the Controlled Substances Act, and it's a Schedule I controlled substance. Now, cannabidiol is a cannabinoid, and it's one of the hundreds that are found in the cannabis plant. So it's really an extract that can be made from any cannabis plant, whether marijuana or hemp. But because hemp has such low amounts of THC in it, it has higher amounts of CBD and other cannabinoids.
Okay.
And
what? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and as it relates to their regulatory statuses, which I believe you also asked, hemp is, allowed. Hemp and cannabis or cannabidiol are both allowed to potentially be used in products depending on what product it is, and also whether or not you have done the appropriate safety and suitability evaluations and or really dug into and done your due diligence with pre-market approvals. So the answer is it depends on what you want to put it in. In the space of pet food, hemp could potentially be used, and we'll talk a little bit more later about kind of where each of the different organizations that look at pet food and pet treats are sitting on things. But the answer is, of course, it depends on the regulatory status. But cannabidiol is the one where FDA, as well as many states, are looking at it more so as a drug than as something that's suitable for a pet treat or nutritional supplement.
Okay, and just to be clear, CBD has a very low level of THC too, correct?
It does. It is also required to have below 0.3%. And, based under state testing programs where use of CBD, marijuana, and hemp in certain products are allowed, many of them test it and are at, non-detection levels. So much, much lower than the 0.3%.
Okay, now I think there's a fair amount of confusion in the marketplace because of at least here in the US, because of the 2018 Farm Bill, which, had a special provision related to hemp. Can you please explain that and what that meant or didn't mean?
Yeah, so the 2018 Farm Bill is kind of where all of this kicked off, where people, started to be really confused about whether or not hemp and or cannabidiol could be included in a wide variety of products. And what that did was really truly take hemp, industrial hemp, which is below 0.3% THC, out of the Controlled Substances Act. And descheduled it, basically. It just pulled it out of that. And that includes hemp as well as extracts and derivatives from the product. Again, so long as they're below that 0.3% of THC. It also authorized USDA to kind of start a federal state process to allow the licensing of cultivation of hemp in various states. But what the Farm Bill didn't do was remove FDA's authority over the approval or use of hemp, CBD, and any other hemp-derived substance in any product. So you still have to go through those pre-market approval processes or internal reviews, depending upon which route you decide to take to market for your product.
Okay, and with hemp, with pet food and treats, which ingredients used in those are usually considered nutritional products, those usually often go through the AFCO definition process to be, allowed to be used by both FDA and state regulators. So hemp has been approved through that process for certain species, but not pets yet, correct?
So what has been done is, I believe some reviews have occurred. I do not believe there's actually an official listing in AFCO just yet of hemp.
Okay.
They have said, though, because FDA did recognize that hemp hearts, hemp seed oil, and hemp seed protein powder are generally recognized as safe, that they would be suitable to go through the AFCO process. However, they've also stated, CBD should be regulated as a drug and likely would not be suitable to go through the AFCO review process. And the reason the AFCO process is important is because, in pet food and animal food in general, we have this dual federal state regulation, and that's with most products. But because our feed control officials at the state level have primary, regulatory authority over kind of the formulations or what goes in a product and what goes on the label, that AFCO process, including its safety reviews, as well as the definition and how you present these ingredients on labels, is really important to make sure that you have buy-in from the states when you're about to register a new product label with them. And that's where they feel, the most comfortable, unless that ingredient and that specific usage is authorized through a food additive petition or the generally recognized as safe status clearly indicated it was acceptable for use in pets.
Okay. So let's talk about CBD more for a minute. It's considered a drug by the regulatory authorities. There is an avenue in the pet space for CBD to legally go into treats, correct? Or other types of products through the National Animal Supplement Council's certification process, correct?
So it's not necessarily fully legal. FDA has not said, they haven't turned over all of the safety and suitability authority over to NASC. However, it is one of the most viable ways to bring a pet supplement to the market that contains CBD or a hemp-derived ingredient. And that is partially because NASC has done a lot of work to develop testing standards, labeling requirements, and other things to allow these products to come to the market. But NASC does not stand in the place of the product owner or brand owner from doing the required safety and suitability, both generation of the data as well as evaluation of the product. So that's not that's kind of where yes and no is the best answer to provide on NASC, but it is a process that is, at least at this point, one of the most reliable, and has some scientific backing to it regarding bringing a cannabidiol based product into the pet space.
Okay. And for folks tuning in, if you're not aware of NASC, it's the National Animal Supplement Council. And I believe you can go look at their information at animalsupplements.org or NASC.cc. And so that they have a lot of good information, even if you're not a member, and you just want to kind of sort of figure out what's going on with that. So recently, the FDA made an announcement regarding mainly CBD, but I think hemp was part of it too. What did that say and didn't say?
Yeah, so just a couple of weeks ago, FDA issued two major, announcements regarding cannabis, and we're going to put it in the broad cannabis category, not necessarily just hemp. The first one was regarding the development of primarily human drugs, but also animal drugs with cannabis or cannabis-derived ingredients. And that guidance is just meant for companies who are working on, safety and efficacy data to bring those products to market through either the new drug approval or the animal new drug approval process at FDA to, really understand what the agency is looking for specific to cannabis-based products. Now, on the other side, about a day later,
We've had a hang up, at least on my end. Let's see if she comes back in just a second. Sorry, folks. Let me see if we can get Emily back here. She's frozen on my screen. Yep. I think she's going to have to try to come back in. Sorry about that. That's Zoom for you, huh? While we're waiting for Emily to come back, just to remind you that if you have questions, we have a lot of more ground to cover with Emily when she comes back on. But if you have other questions that we haven't gotten to yet, or you just want to make sure we address, please be sure to enter them in the chat box, and we will try to get to them. And let me see if she's trying to get back in. Yep.
Debbie, I should be back now. I just joined from my cell phone.
Okay, no problem. As I said to everyone, this is Zoom. This is the way we all live now, right?
Yes, absolutely. So as I was saying, FDA needed the request to issue that regulation is because the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act has what's known as a drug preclusion provision. And basically what that does in the statute, it says if a article, that's what we call it in the FDA space. So if a substance either has a new drug approval or has been authorized for, in substantial clinical investigations, that product is prohibited from being used in a food, animal feed, or dietary supplement unless that ingredient was first marketed in a dietary supplement, food or animal feed, or FDA authorizes it through through a regulation. And since there is no evidence of CBD being on the market prior to its approval as a drug in Epidiolex, which is a human drug for seizures, FDA needed to do that evaluation in order to determine if it could issue a regulation. And that announcement was FDA said there is not enough scientific or efficacy data, and also that CBD was truly not suitable to go through that regulatory process. And in effect, what this has done is they've kind of kicked things back to Congress in order for them to potentially carve out CBD through some form of legislation, whether it's through the Farm Bill that we'll have coming up and is currently being discussed, and those conversations are starting because it expires at the end of September. But also, just to get more direction from them.
Right. Okay. I was going to bring that up. So the Farm Bill is being, renegotiated and it's up for renewal. I mean, do you have any sense? Can you get out your crystal ball or read the tea leaves and, see do you have any sense of whether Congress will address this situation again, or?
So as it relates to CBD specifically, it's kind of unclear. Now that we have the hemp title, as a standalone title within the Farm Bill, that obviously is on the table for discussions. And there are some tweaks that people want to make even to the allowances that were made under the last, 2018 Farm Bill. For example, there are a lot of questions as it relates even to production and cultivation of hemp regarding the 0.3% and it being on a dry weight basis because hemp is not dry weight. And, when it comes to cultivation, people are worried about producing, hot plants and whether or not there's some kind of incremental allowance, on that variability in a natural product. That's one thing that I think will potentially be addressed as it relates to, kind of forcing FDA's hand to issue a regulation related to the use of CBD and, whether it's dietary supplements or animal feed. If anything was included, I would expect it to potentially be just the dietary supplement route. I don't necessarily see Congress pushing forward with the food or animal feed route. And that's partially because most of the bills that have been introduced in past Congresses have really focused on, the dietary supplement route compared to food or animal feed, partially because there's a lot of questions regarding the cumulative exposure from a supplement and from food and any topical products, you as a human or you may be using on your pet, what really that can do and what are those effects on your pet to make sure that it's actually safe in any dosage that's included in a supplement.
Right. Okay. So someone just posted a question. And I think it's just reiterating some of what you said, but kind of getting it down. So they're considering using hemp in a dog snack. Is this legal to do now at any certain level? What is legally required verbiage? I mean, basically, before you can get to the verbiage and the level, you have to do all the studies to show safety and efficacy. Correct?
So that is true, and that's part of why the AFCO process is so important. It while generally recognized as safe means that it is generally recognized as safe for its intended use, which those submissions focused on human food products, not necessarily animal food products. And we have lots of species that we're worried about in the pet space, whether it's cats, dogs, guinea pigs, anything. What amount of hemp or a hemp derived ingredient would be appropriate for a dog may be completely different for a guinea pig or a ferret or even a cat. So that's part of why these pre-market approval processes are so important even in the pet space. And as it relates to labeling, there are a whole lot of things going on in that space. While FDA and AFCO have not necessarily said, here's how you would label and warn it, many of the states have actually kind of stepped in and said, we believe that hemp-derived ingredients, including CBD, are very specific and can be allowed for pet as well as animal food products in their states. And really, that's just a state by state basis. And some of them provide and mandate specific warning labels and statements that need to be made on the product. And others prohibit certain claims from being made on products like, disease and health claims.
Right. Okay. Someone just commented that AFCO had a special webinar recently
Yes.
that you're probably aware of, with experts and regulatory personnel about this topic. And one of the concerns from all three sections was determining if there's a withdrawal time of CBD and or is there accumulation of CBD in what we consume, for example, meat, milk, egg, et cetera. Do you think that will be part of either the new Farm Bill, or AFCO processes?
As it relates to Congress, no, they generally do not dig into the type of detail regarding withdrawal periods. They really leave that up to the appropriate agencies and direct them to evaluate that. And again, that's focused more on livestock species, less so pets. So in that case, that is part of what is required, whether you go through the AFCO process or a food additive petition process at FDA. And, that data is required to be generated to determine the appropriate withdrawals and the cumulative exposure pieces. And on that webinar that, was mentioned in the chat, which I found extremely helpful, just because it's getting some of your state feed control officials and scientists together. One of the two main things that they really focused on as well in the data space that we're missing is true safety as well as good nutritional data regarding the contributions that hemp and any hemp derived ingredient makes. So again, that's why that AFCO process is so important, because those GRAS notifications don't truly apply to pet products at this point in time.
Yeah, and we had a question come in earlier about, are there any studies available, any scientific? So AFCO, it sounds like, would be a source perhaps of anything that may have been done.
So AFCO may have some of that information available, and I do know they went through some of the research that's available, but there's absolutely safety and efficacy studies that have been done. Even some of them have been done here by companies in the US. There are a number in the European Union. I think we have approximately, 15 different CBD or hemp type approvals pending before the European Food Safety Agency, or AFISA. And most of those are, attempting to get additional information from the sponsors of those submissions, primarily because of the fact that many of the studies are proprietary and not necessarily open source. The bigger problem that we're also finding in the scientific data space is that some of the studies are not necessarily reliable or replicable, nor are they peer reviewed, which is really what FDA and AFCO are looking for. So the biggest thing is currently we have this, it's not legal to include hemp or CBD in these types of products. However, we are still needing to develop that data in order to be able to find the safe and suitable uses for these products in pet and animal foods.
Right. So imagine a search of like PLOS One or some, some of the other research journals might turn up. I'm aware of a few companies that have done their own research to get their own products on the market. For everyone who's not, AFCO is aafco.org. So there may be some resources there. You brought up Europe, which is good because we did have some questions coming in about, what is the regulatory status for these substances outside of North America? What are you aware of that's happening in Europe?
So Europe, like I mentioned, we have a number of safety reviews that have been submitted for the suitability of CBD specifically, as well as certain other hemp-derived ingredients as an allowed feed material. And there are specific ones in the pet space. For example, there's one for dogs, cats, I believe ornamental fish, and ornamental birds. So we're hitting a large number of pets in that. That review is currently paused, and the primary reason is because a number of the studies cited in the submission for this safety review were not provided to AFISA, and they do these kind of clock stop letters because they have specific timeframes within which they're required to complete their reviews. So this gives the company that submitted it a little bit more time to submit that data, or work with AFISA in order to get that additional information, to them. When it comes to other countries, they're not necessarily, they each have their own safety reviews. There are very few that, have CBD be necessarily legal for use in pet products as well. But an example is in Australia, it may be legal. However, it's only legal through a prescription from your veterinarian. So again, CBD is really being looked at more as a drug than as a food additive or food ingredient for pet food.
Interesting that there's a veterinary component there. So let's kind of confront the elephant in the room, so to speak. Despite, everything that you said, that, these really are not, bottom line is these substances really are not legal to use in pet food or pet treats unless a company has gone through all these steps you described. So why do we see, and this is true in the human food space too, right? Why do we see so many products on the market? How are companies getting away with this?
I mean, it's what any company does when bringing any product to market. They balance the risk of using these ingredients in whatever formulation they have and the likelihood of enforcement either by a state agency, by FDA. And I will say some of the products that we see on the market are coming from, maybe not our traditional, pet food, pet treat manufacturers.
Right.
So not be familiar with the state registration requirements. Additionally, even as we get some of these, companies who are looking at it a little bit more and including it in pet products, even some of our larger companies, it's a little bit of a catch me if you can kind of situation. And again, you have that variability between states. So a state like Florida allows it. I believe Montana and Wyoming also passed state laws that said, that CBD and hemp derived ingredients are permissible in animal foods. But states like Colorado has said, if it's not in the official publication by AAFCO, we're not going to allow it in any animal food. So that's where you get this variability where you may see nationwide products because a company has, taken the risk, the legal as well as associated business risks to tap into this market and say, because FDA is taking what I would call an enforcement, non-enforcement type of approach as it relates to these products, where they're truly focused on enforcing where there is the highest risk to humans as well as the health of the animal. And that is in livestock species. They have said, absolutely, this is not permissible for food producing animals. They issued a number of warning letters regarding that. And that is primarily because of the questions regarding withdrawal times, especially as it relates to CBD. Not necessarily as focused as much just on hemp and hemp seeds and other items. But then you look on the flip side where they're looking also at the health of the animal, because that's more focused, yes, on the health of the animal, but also the health of humans. In the pet space, where FDA has focused on treat enforcement as well as pet food enforcement, truly is focused on when you make statements and claims that would recommend or is, kind of pushing a pet owner to not use traditional therapies in order to, address an ailment with their animal. We see this a lot in the, joint space. So if you make statements about this treating arthritis in your pets,
right.
Our traditional supplement claims that we make, in accordance with NASC, or if it's, it treats your pet's anxiety or something like that, you're pushing, those pet owners away from true traditional therapies that are approved and have been and are truly regulated and evaluated for safety and suitability by the agency, to these, kind of wild west products.
Right. And FDA did issue some warning letters to pet related companies a couple of years ago, correct? Probably because they had made some pretty strong claims.
That is exactly it. Most of those, were making, what we would call, some of the more egregious claims is the best way to put it. Very much so focused on, treatment of diseases in animals. They're not so much focused on, the products that are making true structure function claims like supporting, wellness or well-being or joint health or anything like that in
or addressing anxiety or
correct.
Yeah. And I should be clear when I made my statement earlier that companies get away with this. I mean, there are companies going through all the steps that they should be going through, and there are some going through the NASC with CBD specifically, going through the NASC process and doing studies and going through that certification. So they are, I mean, they're not doing anything wrong. They're doing what they're supposed to do. And there's another point I was going to make about that. Slipped my mind. Before we'll come back to that. We did have a question. You were talking about Europe. The name of the agency you were talking about is EFISA, right? EFISA?
So it's the European Food Safety Agency. So EFSA. EFISA.
Okay, EFSA. We had a question come in about that. Okay. EFSA. Okay. Do you know anything about Canada's, how the legality of CBD in Canada?
So similar to the United States, Canada has, their own animal and pet food regulations. I do believe, even though they're ahead of the United States as it relates to legality of cannabis and marijuana for recreational use, I do not believe that they have made any specific approvals of the use of CBD or, certain hemp ingredients in animal or pet foods. Now they do, look to, they don't defer to AAFCO necessarily, but they have in many instances, when a product is listed in the AAFCO official publication and has its definition and has gone through that evaluation, that helps for the basis of approval in Canada.
That makes sense. I know what I was going to mention before. I did hear a podcast recording from my colleague, Lindsay Beaton has a podcast called Trending Pet Food, and she interviewed Bill Bilkout, who is the founder and leader of NASC, and he mentioned he of course addressed CBD and hemp because that's a big issue for them too. And he mentioned, it was a state by state. There was a lot of state by state variation, as you have said. He mentioned Idaho, right? That for some reason that stands out to me. Is that a particular one where they are paying more attention to claims?
So I know Idaho has been looking at this, but I do believe that they're one of the states where it's been authorized for inclusion in animal feed. But yes, they are paying attention to that. The one state that's come out and said absolutely not is South Carolina, and they had issued some warning letters. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, almost now, maybe not 5 years ago, probably 4 years ago, to some pet product, brands is the best way to put it. And then also because the states also generally have both manufacturing and cultivation licenses. They're able to kind of see where you're selling products to if you have a license, from the state in order to do that manufacturing and extraction of CBD from hemp. So they kind of find out who your customers are and are able to say, oh, now I know who these companies are. But they're one of the few that's come out outright and said, definitely don't use it in these products, and have taken some enforcement action, even though they were stop sale orders and, requesting withdrawal from the market. At this point, they have not necessarily issued any fines, for violations of state law at this point.
Okay. Well, so if a company, we have someone on the chat box who's has said her company is looking into doing a dog snack with hemp. Is there a way is there one resource, as AAFCO resource, to go in and see like which states, may be easier to work with, which ones may not?
So I do not believe at this point that AAFCO has a specific resource on, where it's allowed, where it is not. Partially because, they're looking at this from a national place and allow the states to make their own decisions as it relates to the suitability of an ingredient in product application. That doesn't mean that AFCO might not generate that resource, at some point in the future, but they truly put it on you as the maker and marketer of the product to determine what states are where this may be allowed or not. And additionally, not all pet products, right, pet foods have to be registered with states, but in those ones that do, they will reject your label if it includes an unapproved ingredient.
This is true.
We see that happen all the time. And that's because this is their primary way of ensuring that both livestock feed as well as pet food is, truly safe for use within their state.
Right. Someone had commented a few minutes ago to never underestimate the power of a properly worded disclaimer. So is that one way to get around some of the label claim questions?
So it depends on where you're thinking about enforcement from. If you're thinking about it from the states, if they require that disclaimer or statement, you need that in order to get your label approved or to, kind of market that product appropriately within the state. However, if you're thinking about, will that disclaimer protect you from consumer litigation, either in the flavor of, this product was unauthorized and you're illegally selling me a product, the product didn't meet the claims that you provided on it, and it was falsely advertised to me, or my pet was injured due to this. Those are kind of the three flavors that you would expect to see in this space. A disclaimer is only, sometimes worth the words that are in it as well as the paper it's printed on. It truly depends on how those plaintiffs' attorneys craft the claim and what they focus on, especially if you're making a large number of, claims on your product that, maybe are structure function claims and meet the NASC guidelines. But, they sometimes interpret those to be drug claims. We see this a lot in the joint health space. I know I keep saying that, but that's where I see a lot of these hemp products, where you'll talk about supporting joint health, supporting natural cartilage production, those kinds of things. And they read that to mean you're treating arthritis in my animal, it will get better. So we've seen those. The product contains, hemp, CBD, or any other type of, potentially active ingredient. We've seen it in Cosequin products and those kinds of things like glucosamine when those are included in there. So that risk just always exists depending upon what you put on your labels. And even if you use kind of that human dietary supplement disclaimer that, this product hasn't been approved by FDA and isn't meant to treat or mitigate any disease, well, truly, me as a regulatory attorney who looks at labels all the time before, companies present them on the market, it's helpful, but that doesn't prevent suit being filed and somebody attempting to, get some money from you for their alleged injuries.
True. Yeah. So we hadn't touched on that yet. We've been talking mostly about the substances in terms of regulatory bodies, but there is a very real consumer litigation element to what pet food brands and treat brands face these days. So have there been any, are you aware of many lawsuits related to these products, these substances?
There have been a handful in the pet product space, mostly that were submitted to or filed against the companies who received warning letters from FDA. In the human side, there have been lots of suits filed, whether it's I failed a drug test, even though I was taking CBD, or your CBD product. This product doesn't contain the amount of cannabidiol or hemp that you claim is in there, or you unlawfully marketed this product and I purchased it. So again, it is one of those situations where there's always going to be risk. The human space is a little bit further ahead than the pet product space. And that's kind of something that we see all the time where once some, good case law gets developed or a number of large settlements on the human side go, because we are, we treat our pets like people. They are, in some instances, your children, they're important parts of your family. they then look to that as trends in the pet product space. And you see that they take, slightly slower, but a very parallel path to human product claims if similar ingredients are being used.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we all know that pet food has been tracking human food very closely for quite some time, and it seems like in this is another example of that. So, just a comment. There's been a couple comments between some folks in the chat box that in the UK, for anyone who's there, hemp products are approved for use in pet food, listed on the EU Feed Materials Register, but CBD is considered a veterinary medicine. So just if anyone is in the UK considering using these substances, that's helpful to know. So I think we've covered a lot of the questions that have come in. Is there anything you think that it's important for people in the industry to know? I mean, what are like the key things to focus on, the bottom line, so to speak, I guess I would put it?
I mean, the bottom line is, we see these products being brought to market, whether they contain CBD or some kind of hemp substance. Generally, it's hemp protein powder or, hemp seed oil. We see a lot of those products. Again, they don't necessarily have the FDA review and AFCO approval at this point for use in the United States. But, the bottom line is some states are allowing this. They are saying that these types of substances are appropriate for use in pet foods or animal foods in general. So sometimes you may, instead of launching a nationwide product, it's more appropriate to focus on a state-by-state product where it is, very clearly allowed. Or you can do what many product makers are doing and saying, FDA's enforcement, non-enforcement position is really focused on the claims we make on these products, so they launch it nationwide. But again, you still have that risk of, the fact that the products are not necessarily truly legally marketed. But that is, that's just a risk that many companies are willing to take and have done that evaluation based on, their business and the riskiness that they're willing to take when it comes to claims or even marketing this type of product.
Okay. But in terms of, as you said earlier, in terms of finding out, every company has to do their own homework in terms of what states, may be safer, so to speak, than others. I think that's, the bottom line there. Someone had just asked, if you have any knowledge of CBD for pets in any of the Asian markets.
I believe that there also, there's interest in it. However, I am not certain, on the exact regulatory approval status of those. Each country is going to have their own, approval and pre-market process. I do know that China currently does not allow it in pet or animal foods. CBD or some hemp may be allowed, but CBD is absolutely not allowed.
Right.
And again, I would expect that many of those countries would make the same distinction that we kind of are going towards here in the US, where CBD is more appropriately regulated as a drug and certain other hemp and hemp-derived ingredients may be appropriate for human food and animal food and all of that. Again, it truly is going to be based on, what the, specific country requires for their pre-market approval process, or if there is another process that doesn't require pre-market approval, kind of like the generally recognized as safe process that we have here, where you do that safety evaluation yourself.
Got you. And then we had someone ask again about the pet supplement area. If you're confused, we probably all are, because supplements are a really gray area for humans and pets. No, CBD aside, any kind of supplements, it's the law is a little fuzzy, right?
Yep.
So can you explain just a little bit more again about how a company might work with NASC? And then I would also encourage anyone who's really interested to check out NASC it's animalsupplements.org, and Bill Bookout, who is the as I said, the founder and the president. He's very amenable to talking to anyone. And so I think his contact information is on the website, but if not, send a message, we can get back to you, but he will gladly walk people through what you can and can't do working with NASC.
Yep, absolutely. And as it relates to that, the way you can participate with NASC is the first step is become a member of NASC. I'm not here to say that NASC is the only way to do this and market these products, but
right.
do have those guidelines that make it, a more palatable approach in the pet product space, specifically in supplements. But one of the things that we need to remember with supplements is that we are, focused on supplementing the diet of the animal. And we go back to this question of the nutritional value of the product to the animal. So supplements do kind of fall in that space as well. Yes, we put in different components and ingredients than we would potentially traditionally eat, but they do follow those same processes, because if you're looking at treating or mitigating a disease or preventing it even, you are marketing a drug product. And the NASC process really truly outlines all of that. And I'll tell you, Bill is a great resource. He's willing to talk to literally anyone about anything, whether it's NASC or even, he'll provide you really detailed information regarding their, CBD kind of process, even if you aren't a member, just to get some familiarity to see if it would be the right process for you and your products.
Right. I just put in the chat, folks, Bill's name and the website for NASC. And again, he just did a podcast with my colleague. And if you go to petfoodindustry.com, I think it's under the news tab at the top, and you can scroll down. There's a trending pet food podcasting, and you'll find his episode. And he's actually addressed this issue too. I'm sorry.
I highly recommend listening to that podcast. It is, besides the fact that I think all of the sessions have been great, Bill's was particularly good outlining NASC and how it works, and
yes,
all of that. He gets lots of good information there.
Yes, and he did specifically address CBD and hemp. And someone else has commented, by the way, that Thailand is
horses.
Approaching approval for pets within 3 to 4 months for CBD. Currently, there's a loophole for horses, and of course, this is at like 0 THC content. And then Japan has CBD for dogs and cats for sale in limited stores. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything else you were hoping that people would take away from this?
I mean, I think the big thing is that, we really need more data on hemp. That's the biggest thing. And it's truly both safety of the animal, as well as the efficacy, depending upon what you would like to do or how you're marketing the product. And also, again, that nutritional value to the animal, especially if you're going the pet food route. Because, we only have limited things that we can put in pet food. It needs to be providing, nutritional value, or providing information or providing flavor or something like that to the product. And we just don't have that right now.
No.
I think everybody is truly focused on safety of the animal and safety of your pets, compared to just making a quick buck and hitting that, green wave, as we've called it, which I would say, I think there's still a lot of interest in these products, but
Definitely.
we're getting where companies are making, more informed decisions about how is the best way to potentially make and market these products that are safe.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Emily, for all your information and expertise and insights. So we have a couple of folks who are asking like how you can address who to contact in each state. There is on AFCO a list of state regulators, so you can go there. But unfortunately, there's no easy way to just say this state does this state, you will have to do your homework, but there is a list on afco.org of each state regulator, correct?
Yes, that is
Yeah.
correct. And they include contact information for all of them. And these state feed control officials, besides the fact that they, are very good at their jobs and, know a lot about what they are, they're extremely helpful and always willing to answer your questions.
Okay, so that is your route, and unfortunately, it will take some elbow grease and time, but you do have a way to get to finding out what each state allows and does not. So thank you again to Emily, and thank you to everyone for participating today. To learn about other pet food industry topics, please watch for more of these Ask the Pet Food Pro chats coming later this year. We also have a number of pet food industry webinars that we list on petfoodindustry.com that might find helpful in addition to the podcast. We also have Pet Food Forum coming in early May, and we will be addressing a number of topics there. Early bird registration is still available for that. We would greatly appreciate your feedback on today's chat to help us improve future ones. So if you could please scan the QR code on the screen, or we will be emailing a survey soon and you can respond to that. Finally, just a reminder that the recording of this chat will be available within a week on petfoodforumevents.com under the Ask the Pro tab. Thank you again, and thanks again to Emily.